The Silent Rancher and the City Boy. A heartwarming story of two men, one ranch, and a secret neither expected. The first thing Noah Vega noticed about the man wasn't the hat. It wasn't the boots caked with dry Montana earth. It wasn't the flannel rolled to the elbows or the jaw that looked like it had been carved from the same red sandstone that jutted out of the hillside behind him. It wasn't even the silence, and God, the silence was enormous out here, the kind of silence Noah hadn't known existed, the kind that pressed against your eardrums like a held breath. No, the first thing Noah noticed was the way Eli Casto looked at him. Like he already knew Noah was going to be a problem. It was 7 in the morning. The light over the Blackridge Ranch was the color of warm honey, the kind of golden that Noah had only ever seen in photograph filters and the occasional oil painting at his mother's apartment. He had pulled his rental car, a compact, embarrassingly red thing, down a gravel road that seemed to go on forever, kicked up a small storm of pale dust behind him, and come to a stop just outside a wooden gate that read in faded black letters, BLACKRIDG. ESD 1941, private property. He had barely stepped out of the car, notebook in hand, pen tucked behind his ear, when the gate swung open. And there was Eli. 6 foot something, a worn brown Stetson low over dark hair, eyes that were impossible to read from a distance but that Noah, even from 10 feet away, could somehow already tell were green, not soft green, not leaf green, the kind of green you see in the deep part of a river where the light barely reaches. He didn't say hello, he didn't wave. He looked at Noah's little red rental car, then he looked at Noah, then he looked back at the car as if the car might offer some explanation for itself. "Noah Vega," Noah said, stepping forward, extending his right hand. "From the Meridian Review, you spoke with my editor, Sandra Calloway. I'm here for the feature piece, the one about traditional. I know why you're here." His voice was low, not unfriendly, but not warm either. It landed in the air between them like a stone dropped in still water. Eli looked at Noah's extended hand for exactly 1 second longer than was comfortable, then reached out and shook it. His grip was firm, his palm was calloused, and there was a half second, just a half second, where neither of them let go and something passed between them that Noah couldn't name, something that made him forget what he'd been about to say next. "You're late," Eli said. Noah blinked. The flight from New York was delayed. "Didn't say it was your fault." Eli turned and walked back through the gate. "Come on." That was it. No pleasantries, no tour introduction, no welcome to Blackridge. "We're so honored to have you," energy that Noah had been half expecting based on the phone call between his editor Sandra and whoever had answered the ranch's landline 3 weeks ago. Just, come on. Noah stood there for a moment, looking at the open gate and the broad back of the man walking away from him. He grabbed his duffel bag from the back seat, slung it over his shoulder, and followed. The Blackridge Ranch was enormous. That was the only word for it. Noah had grown up in a 2-bedroom apartment in the Bronx. He had spent 4 years in a university dorm and the last 3 years in a studio apartment in Brooklyn, where his kitchen was technically also his living room and his bedroom was separated from the rest of the space by a curtain he'd hung himself. The concept of land, actual unbroken, rolling, endless land, was something that existed for him largely in the abstract, in photographs, in films. This was nothing like a photograph. The main house sat at the end of the gravel road, a wide single-story structure with a wraparound porch and a dark green metal roof that caught the morning light and threw it back in amber sheets. Behind it, 2 large red barns. Beyond them, paddocks and fences stretching out toward a line of mountains in the distance that looked painted against the sky. Horses moved slowly in the early morning cool, dark shapes against the pale gold grass. Somewhere, a rooster was making its feelings known. Noah stopped walking for a moment, just to breathe it in. He'd been a writer his whole life. He'd written about restaurant openings and city council drama and the best new neighborhoods in Brooklyn. He'd written a piece about a street artist in Queens that had gotten 300 shares. He'd written about music and fashion, and once memorably a 600-word piece about a particularly charismatic pigeon he'd seen on the subway. He was good at his job, he was quick, he was clever. But standing here, looking at all of this open, golden, impossible space, he felt something crack open in his chest that he didn't quite have a word for yet. "You coming?" Eli's voice drifted back to him. "Yeah," Noah said. "Yeah, I'm coming." The guest room was small but clean, wooden floors, a quilted bed that looked like it had been made by someone's grandmother, a window that looked out over the paddock. There was a hook on the door for a coat, a small wooden dresser, a lamp on the nightstand that had a slightly crooked shade. It was, Noah thought, the most honest room he'd ever been in. "Breakfast is at 6, Eli said, standing in the doorway. He didn't lean against the frame. He stood with his arms loose at his sides, perfectly still, like a man who had never felt the need to fill space with restless energy. Work starts at 7. If you want to follow me around and write your piece, you keep up and you stay out of the way. I was hopping to do some interviews, Noah said. Ask you about the history of the ranch, your grandfather's. We can talk in the evenings. You'd be willing to. I said we can talk in the evenings, a pause, if there's something worth saying. Noah studied him. There was no hostility in his face, no impatience. It was just blank, calm like a lake on a windless morning. Noah had interviewed people across the country, people who were nervous and people who were guarded and people who were performing for the camera, and he had never once in his career encountered a person who seemed this completely, utterly settled in himself. It was deeply unsettling. Okay, Noah said, evenings, got it. Eli nodded once, turned, and walked away down the hallway. His boots made soft sounds on the wooden floor. Then even those faded and Noah was alone in the honest little room with the crooked lamp. He sat down on the quilted bed, pulled out his notebook, wrote at the top of a fresh page, Eli Casto, 24, silent, green eyes, possibly a robot. Then he crossed out the last 3 words, capped his pen and lay back to stare at the ceiling. Through the window, the Montana sky was turning from gold to a rich, wide blue. A horse nickered softly somewhere outside. The rooster, apparently satisfied, had gone quiet. Noah closed his eyes. He thought, this is going to be a very long 2 weeks. He had absolutely no idea. Breakfast at 6 meant breakfast was ready at 6. Not 6:05, not 6:15, 6. Noah, who had set 3 alarms and still somehow arrived in the kitchen at 6:03, slid into a chair at the long wooden table to find Eli already seated, already eating, already halfway through what looked like enough scrambled eggs and toast to fuel a small army. A second plate sat at the chair across from him, steaming, with a mug of black coffee beside it. You cook, Noah said, slightly breathless from speed walking down the hall. Eli glanced up. Who else would? I don't know, I assumed. Noah looked around. Are there other people who work here? 2 ranch hands, they're already out. Eli looked back at his plate. Sit down. Noah sat. He picked up his fork, looked at the eggs, perfectly scrambled with a bit of something green in them, chives maybe, and then looked across the table at Eli, who was reading something. A small, worn paperback. The kind with a cracked spine that told you it had been opened hundreds of times. You read at breakfast, Noah said. Meh. What are you reading? A pause. Eli turned a page. Book. Noah blinked. Then, against his better judgment, he laughed. He couldn't help it. It came out of him before he could stop it, short and surprised, and it bounced off the wooden walls of the kitchen and hung in the air for a moment. Eli looked up from his book. His eyes met Noah's. There it was again, that thing, that unnameable, weightless thing that happened when their eyes connected. It lasted maybe 2 seconds. Eli looked back at his book. It's Lonesome Dove, Eli said, a beat later, quietly, like he was offering something small that cost him. I've never read it, Noah said. I know. How do you know? You looked at the cover like you'd never seen it before. Noah glanced at the cover, a man on horseback, plains behind him. Sky above, is it good? It's the best book I've ever read. He said it simply, without any of the defensive energy that Noah had associated with strong opinions, just, it is the best book I've ever read, the same way you might say the sky is blue or fire is hot. Factual, final. Can I borrow it when you're done? Noah asked. Eli looked at him again. Something shifted briefly in those green eyes. You'll be gone before I finish. The words landed without cruelty but somehow still stung. Noah picked up his coffee. Maybe I'm a fast reader. Eli didn't answer, but Noah, watching him carefully the way he always watched people because that was just what he did, the journalist's reflex, thought he saw the very corner of Eli's mouth move. Not quite a smile, something smaller than that, a hint that somewhere behind all that stillness there was a human being. It was, Noah would think later, the most interesting thing he'd seen all morning. Work at the Blackridge Ranch was not glamorous. Noah had known, intellectually, that ranch life was physical. He had known it involved early mornings and animals and manual labor. But there is a significant difference between knowing something and standing in a paddock at 7:15 in the morning while a horse the size of a small car looks at you with what can only be described as contempt. The horse's name was Thunder. He was a dark bay gelding, 16 hands high with a white blaze down his nose and an attitude problem that Eli seemed entirely unbothered by. "He doesn't like me," Noah said. "He doesn't know you." Eli didn't look up from the latch he was adjusting on the fence. "He's looking at me like he wants me to leave." "He looks at everyone like that." Eli finished with the latch, straightened up, and walked over to where Thunder was standing, head high, nostrils wide. Eli reached up and put his hand on the horse's neck, not patting him, just placing his hand there, still, steady. The horse's ears, which had been pinned back slightly, slowly came forward. Its head dropped an inch. Noah watched, completely silent. It was the most remarkable thing. No words, no special gesture, just the weight of one hand on a neck, and something in the animal calmed like a radio finding its signal. "How do you do that?" Noah asked. "Do what?" "That, the thing with your hand." Eli looked at him. "He just needed to know I was there." "That's it." "That's always it?" He took his hand away, gave Thunder a brief scratch behind the ear, and walked on. "Come on, we've got water troughs to check." Noah fell into step behind him, pulling out his notebook, scribbling. "He just needed to know I was there." He underlined it. Then he looked up to make sure he wasn't about to walk into a fence, and found that Eli had stopped and turned around and was watching him right. Their eyes met again. Noah didn't look away, neither did Eli. "You write everything down," Eli said. "Habit." "Is it going in the article?" "Only if it's good." "Was it good?" Noah looked down at his notebook at the underlined sentence. "Yeah," he said honestly, "it was." Eli turned and kept walking, but this time Noah was almost certain he saw it, that tiny, barely there shift at the corner of his mouth, almost a smile, almost. The two ranch hands were a pair of brothers in their 30s, Marcus, who was broad and loud and laughed at nearly everything, and Del, who was lean and quiet and seemed to communicate mostly through pointed looks and occasional grunts. They were good at their jobs. They were polite to Noah in the easy, uncomplicated way of people who had no strong opinion about strangers as long as the strangers stayed out of the way. "You gonna write a book about us?" Marcus asked at lunch, grinning. "A magazine piece," Noah said. "What magazine?" "The Meridian Review." Marcus nodded slowly, clearly having no idea what that was. "Is it famous?" "In certain circles." "What circles?" "Mostly people who live in cities and feel guilty about it." Marcus laughed loudly at that. Del looked up from his sandwich and gave Noah what might have been a nod of respect. Eli, sitting at the end of the table, was reading his book again. "So what are you writing about?" Marcus pressed on. "The ranch, the history, traditional ranching practices, how places like this are disappearing." "We're not disappearing," Del said flatly. "No, I know, that's actually kind of the point of the piece. There are ranches that have kept going, that have held on, and I want to write about what that looks like from the inside." Noah paused. "Your boss agreed to let me spend 2 weeks here and—" "Eli's not our boss," Marcus said cheerfully. "He's our, what do you call it, Del?" "Our pain in the ass," Del said. Marcus pointed at Del with his sandwich. "He's our pain in the ass, but also our friend. His grandpa ran this place before him." He lowered his voice, though not by much. "Old Hector Casto, best man I've ever known, passed 3 years ago." Noah glanced at Eli, who had turned a page without any visible reaction to being discussed. "I'm sorry to hear that," Noah said, keeping his voice low. "Yeah, well," Marcus leaned back. "Eli keeps this place going because it was Hector's, because it was the family's. That's all you need to know for your article, I think." Noah wrote it down. The evenings, it turned out, were different. Not different in the way that Eli became a different person, he didn't. He remained himself, contained, careful with words, still in the way that deep water is still. But in the evenings, after the work was done and the horses were settled and the light had gone amber and then rose and then deep purple over the mountains, something in the atmosphere of the ranch shifted. The urgency lifted. The silence changed quality. It became less like a wall and more like a room. On the third evening, Noah found Eli on the porch. He was sitting in one of 2 wooden chairs that faced the open view, a bottle of beer on the railing beside him, his hat on the hook by the door. Without the hat he looked younger. His hair was dark and slightly longer than the hat usually let on, and it was a little disheveled from the day, and for a moment Noah stood in the doorway looking at him and felt something so specific and so strange in his chest that he quickly looked away. "You said we could talk in the evenings," Noah said, stepping out onto the porch. He had his notebook. He always had his notebook. Eli glanced at the notebook, then at the empty chair beside him. sit down. Noah sat. The view was extraordinary open grassland rolling out to where the mountains rose like dark teeth against the darkening sky. The first stars were appearing. The air smelled of dry grass and something else, something clean and elemental that Noah had no name for. City air smelled of exhaust and coffee and other people. This air smelled of the earth itself. Your grandfather built this place, Noah said. His father built it, Hector kept it. And now you. And now me. Noah turned his pen between his fingers. How old were you when you came to live here? Silence, then 9. From where? Another silence? Longer. Noah had learned in 3 days to not fill Eli's silences the way he would have filled anyone else's. With Eli, the silences weren't empty, they were occupied. He was in there somewhere choosing. Billings, Eli said finally, my parents split. My mom had, he stopped, started again. She had things she needed to deal with. Hector took me in. And you just stayed. It was home, he said it with no drama and no self-pity, which somehow made it land harder. First place that ever felt like it. Noah looked at him. In the fading light, Eli's face was all shadow and amber, the bones of his jaw and cheek catching what was left of the sun. He was looking out at the mountains, not at Noah. But Noah was looking at him, and he was aware of that in a way that was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. Do you ever miss the city? Noah asked. I mean, have you ever? I've been to Billings, I've been to Bozeman, a beat, went to Denver once. What did you think? Too many people. He picked up his beer, too much noise. I live in Brooklyn. Eli turned and looked at him. How do you stand it? Noah considered this genuinely. I don't know, I used to love it. Everything is right there, restaurants, music, people everywhere, something always happening. He paused, looking out at the mountains. I've been there 3 years and I can't remember the last time I sat somewhere this quiet. Does it bother you, the quiet? It did the first day. Noah looked at him. It doesn't anymore. Eli held his gaze for a moment, then looked back at the mountains. You can ask your questions, Eli said. I thought I was. You were asking about me. That's not the article. The article is about the ranch, Noah said, but the ranch is you. You can't write one without the other. Silence. Tell me about the horses, Noah said. Start there. And Eli talked, not at length, not in the way that some people talk, flowing and associative and eager to fill the air, but carefully, precisely, each word considered before it was offered so that nothing was wasted. He talked about the horses and the land and the relationship between the two. He talked about how his grandfather had trained him to read the weather in the color of the sky, to read a horse's mood in the set of its ears, to read the land in the way the grass bent. He talked about drought and winter and the kind of work that doesn't end. He talked about the difference between a job and a calling. Noah wrote everything down, but at some point, without quite noticing when, he stopped writing and just listened. The stars came out, the mountains disappeared into darkness. The only light was the yellow glow from the house behind them and the cool blue of the night sky above. Eli finished talking. The silence settled again, but it was different now, not the silence of two strangers, something warmer than that. You're a good talker, Noah said, when you decide to be. You're a good listener, Eli said, when you put the notebook down. Noah looked at the notebook in his lap, the pen uncapped, loosely held. He hadn't written anything in an hour. Occupational hazard, Noah said. I always want to capture everything. Not everything should be captured. Eli stood, picked up his beer bottle. Some things are just for being in. He went inside. The screen door swung shut behind him with a soft wooden clap. Noah sat on the porch alone. The stars were brilliant and thick and so close they felt like they might fall. He looked down at the last line he'd written in his notebook an hour ago. The difference between a job and a calling. Below it, without thinking, he wrote him. He looked at it, stared at it for a long moment. Then he turned the page, found a clean one, and started his field notes for the article. Days passed the way days do in places with no clocks on the wall, not by counting hours but by the quality of the light. Noah fell into the rhythm of the ranch the way you fall into sleep, slowly, then all at once. He helped with the morning feed, though help was generous. Mostly he carried things and handed things and tried to stay out of the way of the horses and the two brothers who moved through their work with the easy confidence of people doing things they'd done 1,000 times. He watched Eli work with the animals, the same still-handed, patient way that he'd watched that first morning, the way a horse would soften and quiet under his hands. He watched Eli fix a broken fence post in the east pasture, the efficiency and precision of it, the way he didn't waste a single motion. He watched Eli move through the ranch the way the ranch itself moved through the day, naturally, inevitably, like the sun moving across the sky. And Eli watched him. Not obviously, not constantly, but there were moments, and Noah cataloged them because cataloging was what he did, when he would look up from something and find Eli's eyes on him just briefly before they moved away again. Green eyes in shadow, or green eyes in morning light, or green eyes catching the orange flare of sunset from across a paddock. Always moving away before they could be caught, always just long enough to register. Noah told himself it was nothing. He was a journalist. He was being studied the way any outsider is studied in a closed community. It was curiosity, professional assessment, the reasonable evaluation of an unknown entity on familiar ground. He told himself this quite firmly, several times a day. It didn't entirely stick. On day 5, Noah made a mistake. He'd been trying to be useful, genuinely trying, in the way of someone who is not used to physical work but has too much pride to just stand around watching, and he had climbed up onto the paddock fence to get a better angle for a photograph. He had his phone out, trying to get a shot of the mountains behind the main horse barn, the way the afternoon light was doing something extraordinary to the peaks, turning them from stone to something almost liquid. He got the shot. He leaned back slightly to check it. The fence, which was old and had perhaps been load-bearing in a different era but was not currently up to the task of bearing Noah's 165 pounds at an awkward angle, made a sound that was somewhere between a creak and a complaint. And then the top rail gave way. Noah had a single, crystalline moment of realizing he was falling, the phone, the notebook tucked under his arm, the blue sky tilting at a wrong angle, and then two things happened nearly simultaneously. His foot caught the lower rail, which slowed him, and a hand caught his arm. Eli's hand around his forearm, grip like iron. Noah's weight swung out, then arrested, and he found himself hanging half off the fence in a way that would have been entirely undignified if he had any brainpower left to spare for dignity, which he did not. Because Eli had caught him, and the momentum of catching him had pulled them close together, and Eli's other hand had grabbed his shoulder for additional purchase, and Noah was now essentially suspended at a diagonal angle with Eli's face approximately 6 inches from his own. The world held very still. The 6 inches between them felt like both too much and not enough. Noah could see everything at this distance. The faint scar on Eli's lower lip, the way his jaw was set, the very particular green of his eyes, darker in the afternoon shadow than they looked in morning light, more like the deep river green Noah had thought of on the first day. He could feel the heat of Eli's grip through his sleeve. He could see the slight widening in Eli's expression, barely there, the shift of someone who had moved on pure reflex and was now catching up to what the reflex had resulted in. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them moved. A horse nickered somewhere behind them. The sound broke whatever the moment was. Eli pulled Noah upright with a firm, steady motion, stepped back, and released him. Noah grabbed the fence with both hands, breathing harder than the situation strictly warranted, and tried to look like a person who had not just forgotten where he was for a full 4 seconds. "You all right?" Eli said. "Yeah," Noah's voice came out slightly rougher than intended. He cleared his throat. "Yeah, I'm fine, the fence." "I know, I've been meaning to replace that rail." Eli bent down and picked up Noah's phone from the dirt, checked the screen, cracked in one corner, still showing the mountain photograph, and handed it back. "Don't climb on things you don't know the condition of." "Right, good advice, I'll file that away." Eli looked at him for a moment, something unreadable behind his eyes. Then he crouched down and began examining the broken fence rail, running his hand along the wood with the focused attention he gave to everything. Noah stood there, phone in hand, mountain photograph still on the screen, and tried to locate his professional composure, which seemed to have wandered off somewhere in the preceding 30 seconds. "I got a good shot," he said eventually. "Of what?" Eli didn't look up. "The mountains before the fence situation." Eli was silent for a moment, then very quietly, "Let me see." Noah held out his phone. Eli looked at the photograph, the way the afternoon light hit the peaks, the deep shadow of the valley, the pale gold of the grass in the foreground, the enormous sky. He looked at it for a long moment. "Yeah," Eli said. He handed the phone back. "That's good." And he went back to examining the broken rail, and Noah stood there in the afternoon light and thought, "I am in serious trouble." That night at dinner, something had shifted. Not dramatically, not obviously, It would have been invisible to anyone who hadn't been cataloging every silence and every glance for 5 days, but Noah had been, and so he noticed. Eli sat slightly differently, not turned away the way he'd been the first few nights when the conversation was purely functional. He sat at the table like someone who had decided to be present in a different way, more shoulder toward Noah, easier in the chair, as if some internal tension had been quietly released. He also twice said something that was not strictly necessary for the practical operation of the dinner. The first time was when Noah mentioned, in passing, that he'd been working on his second long-form piece before this assignment, an essay about loss, specifically about the way grief changes the geography of a city, how places you went with someone become impossible to walk past once they're gone. Eli listened, then said after a moment, "That's true." Nothing more, but he'd said it with a weight that suggested personal experience, and he didn't deflect or change the subject. Just let it sit there between them on the table. "You felt that?" Noah asked carefully. "Hector's chair?" He nodded at the head of the table, an empty chair slightly apart from the others, the kind of separation that said that chair is not vacant, it is reserved. "I haven't sat in it, won't." "How long ago?" 3 years. 3 years and you haven't moved the chair. "Why would I?" Noah looked at the chair, then at Eli. "I don't think I've ever loved anything the way you love this place," he said. It came out before he'd fully decided to say it, and he felt a brief surge of the journalist's instinct to walk it back, to make it professional, to contextualize it. He let it stay. Eli looked at him. "What do you love?" he asked. The question landed gently, but it reached somewhere deep. Noah turned his fork over in his hands and thought about it honestly, because Eli, he had realized, was the kind of person you didn't answer dishonestly, not because he would call you on it. He might not. But because being dishonest in front of that particular quality of attention felt somehow wrong, like talking too loud in a library. "I used to think I loved the city," Noah said. "The energy, the noise, the feeling that things were always happening." He paused. "I'm starting to think I was confusing things happening with something actually mattering to me." Eli was quiet. "That sounds like a very New York kind of crisis," he said eventually. Noah laughed, surprised. It was the driest, most understated thing Eli had said to him in 5 days, and it was funny in the way of things that are only funny because they're true. "It's embarrassingly on brand, I know," Noah said. "Nothing embarrassing about it." Eli stood to clear the dishes. "Figuring out what matters takes time, some people never do." He took the plates to the sink. Noah sat at the table and thought about that for a long moment. The second unnecessary thing Eli said was on the way out of the kitchen, when he paused in the doorway and said, without turning around, "The North Fence Trail, tomorrow morning, if you want a better shot at the mountains." Then he was gone. Noah sat at the table alone. He was going to write a very good article, he thought. He was also, he thought, in slightly over his head in a way that had nothing to do with the article. The North Fence Trail was exactly what Eli had promised. It was a path that ran along the northern boundary of the property, rising gradually up the hillside until you reached a point, a natural ledge of flat rock, wind-worn and smooth, from which the entire valley spread out below you and the mountains rose directly before you, so close and so massive that they felt less like a view and more like a presence. Eli hadn't said anything on the way up. Neither had Noah, which was unusual for Noah, who had a natural inclination toward filling silences and had spent 5 days resisting it. But something about the trail, the way it climbed through the early morning air, the scrub pine on either side, the earth giving slightly under each step, made silence feel right. They reached the ledge as the sun broke over the eastern mountains. Noah stopped walking and just stood there. He'd seen sunrises before. He lived in Brooklyn. He'd seen the sun come up over the East River plenty of times, usually by accident after a late night, always from the wrong side of tired. He'd seen sunrises from airplane windows. He'd seen them on screensavers. This was none of those things. This was the sun, the actual sun, throwing itself over an actual mountain range and striking the valley below with a light that was less illumination than it was transformation. Everything it touched became gold: the grass, the river that wound through the valley floor, which Noah hadn't even known was down there, the red roofs of the ranch buildings far below, the pale stone of the mountain faces. The air itself seemed to vibrate with it. "Oh," Noah said, "just that, oh." Beside him, Eli stood with his hands in his jacket pockets, looking at the view with the expression of a person who has seen this hundreds of times and has not gotten used to it, in the best possible sense of not getting used to something. Noah took photos, several. He knew, even as he was taking them, that they wouldn't capture it. They would capture a sunrise. They would not capture this specific quality of light, this specific cool warm air, this specific standing next to a person feeling that was making his heart do something irregular. He put the phone away. "Thank you," he said, "for showing me this." "Hector used to bring me up here," Eli said. "Every morning for the first summer, said if I was going to understand the ranch, I had to understand what it looked like from above." "Did it work?" "I've never stopped coming up here," he looked at Noah, "so I suppose it did." They stood in the growing light. Below them, the ranch woke slowly. He could see, at this distance, the small moving shapes of Marcus and Dell heading toward the barns, a horse moving in the paddock, the ordinary beautiful machinery of the day beginning. "Can I ask you something?" Noah said. "You're going to whether or not I say yes." "Fair, your mother, you said she had things she needed to deal with. Did you ever?" He stopped. "Sorry, that's too personal." Eli looked at him. "She got better eventually. We talk, it's—" he chose his words carefully. "It's not what it is in movies. She's my mother, I love her, it's complicated." He paused. "That's the actual human version, you can't print that." "I know. But you're writing it down." Noah looked at his notebook, then back at Eli. "In a different section, the section I don't show anyone." Eli studied him. "You have a section like that. Doesn't every journalist?" "I don't know any other journalists." "Fair." Noah closed the notebook. "The section where the real stuff goes, the stuff that's too, I don't know, too specific, too human, too much like it actually belongs to the person it's about." Eli was quiet for a long moment. "What's in that section about me?" The question was asked so directly, so simply, that Noah felt the full weight of it immediately. His heart did the thing again, the irregular, slightly alarmed thing. He looked at Eli, who was looking at him with those impossible green eyes in that full morning light, and he thought very carefully about what to say. "The fence thing," Noah said finally. Eli blinked. "The fence." "When I fell, what you said?" Noah kept his voice even. "About the horse, he just needed to know I was there. I think I've written that sentence about 15 times in 15 different places in my notebook because I can't figure out where it actually goes." Something moved across Eli's face, not the near smile this time, something more open than that. "Why not?" "Because it feels like it's about more than the horse." The silence stretched between them, thin and bright as wire. "Maybe it is," Eli said. He didn't elaborate. He turned and looked back at the mountains, jaw set, hands still in his pockets. Noah looked at his profile, the line of his nose, the dark hair above his ear, the straight line of his mouth. He looked for exactly as long as he could justify, then looked back at the view. The sun was fully up now. The gold had mellowed into the ordinary, extraordinary blue of a Montana morning. They went back down the trail without speaking, and the silence between them was the warmest thing Noah had felt in years. On day 8, Noah rode a horse for the first time in his life. It was not Thunder. It was a gentle older mare named Biscuit who was, according to Marcus, basically a couch with legs and the best temperament in the county. She was broad and slow and regarded Noah with patient, mild eyes as he stood beside her, trying to remember the steps Eli had shown him an hour ago. "Left foot in the stirrup," Eli said. He was standing close enough that Noah could have turned and been immediately in his personal space. He didn't turn. "Don't grab the saddle horn, left hand on the reins, right on the yeah, now step up and swing over." "What if I—" "You won't fall. You don't know. Biscuit hasn't dumped a rider in 6 years, she's not going to start with you." Noah put his weight in the stirrup, swung his right leg over, and found himself sitting on the back of a horse for the first time in 23 years of life. "Oh," he said for the second time in a week, just oh. It was higher than he'd expected. The world from the back of a horse was different. He could see over the fence. He could see the full sweep of the paddock. The mountains looked closer. "All right," Eli said from below and to the left, looking up at him. Noah looked down. Big mistake, not because of the height, because of the angle. Looking down at Eli meant looking at his face from above, the light coming in from the side, catching the angle of his jaw. The slight brightness in his expression genuine, if subtle, watching Noah on this horse. Yeah, Noah said, I'm good. He was not remotely good, but Biscuit shifted her weight in a slow, rocking way beneath him, and Noah grabbed the reins with both hands and decided that good was a relative concept. They went around the paddock twice, then Eli opened the gate and they went into the lower field, Eli on Thunder, Noah on Biscuit, walking at a pace that was slightly faster than standing still and considerably slower than a jog. Eli rode the way he did everything, effortlessly, without unnecessary movement, as though he and the horse had reached some private agreement about how things would go. You grew up riding, Noah said. I grew up watching. Hector had me in the saddle by 10. Were you scared? A pause of Thunder, no, of looking stupid in front of Hector, he almost smiled. Yes. Did you? The first day I grabbed the saddle horn on a trot and he didn't speak to me for an hour. That was punishment enough. Noah laughed. The sun was warm on his back. Biscuit plodded on. Somewhere in the tree line along the field's edge, a bird was making a complicated noise. Tell me about him, Noah said. Hector. Eli rode in silence for a moment, then he started talking. He talked about Hector the way you talk about someone who has shaped the geography of your inner life, carefully, with love and with precision. He told Noah about a man who had worked his land with discipline and joy in equal measure, who had cooked badly and sung worse and laughed at himself loudly and often, who had known the name of every horse and every star and every type of grass on his property, who had told Eli the first summer that there were 3 things a man needed: work that mattered, land he could stand on, and at least one person he didn't have to explain himself to. He had all 3, Noah asked. He did. Eli's voice was quiet. He said he worried about me. Why? Said I was good at the land and the work. Said the third one. He stopped. The person you don't have to explain yourself to. Said I hadn't found it yet. The field stretched out around them, the mountains ahead, the horses moving steady and slow through the warm morning. Did you ever tell him he was wrong? Noah asked. I wouldn't lie to Hector. Noah looked at his hands on the reins, then at the mountains, then, carefully, at the man riding beside him. I don't think you have to explain yourself to me, he said. He said it to the mountains, not to Eli. It felt less loaded that way somehow, less like a declaration and more like a simple, observable fact. I mean, I know I ask a lot of questions, that's different, you don't have to explain yourself. He felt Eli look at him, he didn't look back. I know, Eli said quietly. The horses walked on, the bird in the tree line sang its complicated song. The mountains stood where they'd always been. On day 10, a visitor arrived. His name was Ryan Beaumont, and he was, in the objective assessment of the situation, extremely handsome. He was 25 or so, with blonde hair and easy confidence and the particular lean look of someone who spent time outdoors without quite committing to it full time. He drove a nice truck. He wore boots that looked newer than Eli's by about 4 years. He worked at the Whitmore property 2 ranches over, and apparently he and Eli had some kind of ongoing arrangement about shared grazing land that required periodic conversation. Noah met him at lunch on day 10, when Ryan sat down at the table like he'd been sitting at that table for years, and immediately turned the volume of the room up by 30%. You must be the writer, Ryan said, reaching across to shake Noah's hand. His grip was easy and warm and he held the handshake slightly longer than necessary. I heard Eli had a city boy following him around for a magazine. Noah Vega, Noah said, and I prefer journalist. Ryan grinned. Well, Noah Vega who prefers journalist, what do you think of the great state of Montana so far? Beautiful, Noah said honestly, quieter than I expected, but beautiful. You get used to the quiet, Ryan leaned back, casual as anything, or you love it the first time you experience it like me. He said it like an invitation. Noah noticed this. He also noticed, because he noticed everything, it was the problem with him that Eli, sitting at the end of the table with his book open as always, had not turned a page in 2 minutes. How long have you worked the Whitmore place? Noah asked Ryan. About a year, came out from Colorado originally. Ryan reached for the bread basket. I heard about an opening and thought, why not? Best decision I've made. He looked around the kitchen warmly. I love it out here, the people, the land, all of it. Do you miss the city? Denver, Ryan waved a hand. Not for a second, you start to feel the land get into you after a while, under your skin, you know. I think I'm starting to, Noah said. Yeah, Ryan looked at him with what was very clearly interest. Well, if Eli hasn't shown you everything worth seeing, I'd be happy to take you out. He's seen it, Eli said. Everyone looked at him. He was looking at his book. He had not looked up. His voice had been perfectly even. We did the North Trail, Noah said, to nobody in particular. Oh, the rock ledge, Ryan raised his eyebrows. That's a good one. He doesn't take everyone up there. A brief silence. Does he not? Noah said, carefully not looking at Eli. I've known Eli 3 years and he's never taken me up there, Ryan said, still in his easy, good-natured way, apparently not tracking the undercurrents. Eli turned a page. Noah looked at his lunch. Marcus was watching all of this with the expression of a man watching a very interesting sport. After lunch, Noah found Eli in the barn. He was working on Thunder's saddle, cleaning the leather with a cloth and a tin of conditioner, methodical as always. He didn't look up when Noah came in, but he shifted slightly, a subtle realignment like a compass needle adjusting. Ryan seems friendly, Noah said. He is. Has he worked the Whitmore place long? I said. Right, Noah leaned against a stall door. Thunder watched him from the next stall with his usual level of skepticism. He offered to show me around. I heard. Noah waited, nothing came. Is that a problem? He asked. Eli stopped moving the cloth just briefly. Why would it be? I don't know, Noah watched him. You answered for me. I said you'd seen it. He started moving the cloth again. You have. I know, I just. Ryan's a good guy, Eli said, and there was something in his voice that was very precisely neutral in the way that something only is when it's being held that way deliberately. You're free to take him up on it. Noah looked at the top of his hat, the brim, the dark hair just visible at the back, the set of his shoulders. I don't want to take him up on it, Noah said. Silence. I'm here for the story, Noah said. I'm following you, that's the assignment. Eli didn't respond. Eli. What? Look at me. A long pause, then Eli set the cloth down on the workbench and turned. He was expressionless, or he was working very hard to be expressionless, and Noah had been watching him for 10 days and knew the difference. They looked at each other from across the barn aisle. Thunder huffed softly. The smell of hay and leather and wood filled the air between them. I'm not interested in Ryan, Noah said, simply, directly. Something in Eli's jaw changed just slightly. You've got 4 more days, he said. I know. Then you go back to Brooklyn. I know. They were quiet for a moment. I know, Noah said again, and this time there was something under it that wasn't quite grief but was adjacent to it, and he could see Eli hear it. Eli picked up the cloth, turned back to the saddle. North Trail tomorrow morning, he said. I'll be ready at 6. I said 6 in the morning, the ranch, not Brooklyn time. That was one time I was 3 minutes late. 3.5. Eli. What? I'll be ready at 6. He turned back to Thunder's saddle. Noah stood in the barn door a moment longer, watching him work, feeling all the things he didn't have words for pressing against the inside of his chest like a hand against glass. Then he went back to the honest room with the crooked lamp and opened his notebook to the section that wasn't for anyone else and wrote for an hour straight. Day 12. The weather had been building for 2 days. Noah could see it in the way the mountains kept disappearing into cloud and reappearing, the way the air changed texture throughout the day, the way the horses moved with an edge of restlessness that wasn't there before. Eli watched the sky constantly, the way a person watches something they trust to tell them the truth. The storm came at noon. It didn't arrive gradually. It arrived the way Montana storms arrive, which is to say suddenly and with total commitment. 1 minute the sky was overcast and breezy. The next, the wind hit like a wall and the rain came horizontal and the temperature dropped 8 degrees in less than 5 minutes. Marcus and Dell had gone to town that morning for supplies. The truck wouldn't be back until evening. It was just Noah and Eli on the ranch when the sky opened. They had been in the south paddock checking fence line when the first serious gust came through. Eli looked at the sky and said with his particular economy of expression, "Run." They ran. They made the barn door with maybe 30 seconds to spare before the rain hit the roof like 1,000 fists. and Noah stood in the entrance of the barn with his jacket soaked through in 3 places and his hair plastered to his forehead and tried to catch his breath. Eli was pulling the barn doors shut behind them, the wind fighting him for it. Noah stepped in to help. They pulled together, both hands on the heavy wood, leaning into it, the storm howling on the other side until the latch caught and the door sealed, and the noise outside immediately became something slightly more distant, slightly more survivable. They stood in the relative quiet of the barn. The rain drummed the roof enormously. Thunder, the horse, this time shifted in his stall. Noah looked at Eli. Eli looked at Noah. They were both soaked, they were both breathing hard. There was approximately 18 inches between them in the doorway. "Well," Noah said. "Yeah," Eli said. That was the extent of the weather commentary. Eli moved to check on the horses, going stall to stall, hands on necks, murmured sounds, the same patient, grounding presence that Noah had watched with something close to reverence for 12 days. Noah sat on a hay bale and tried to wring some of the water out of his jacket sleeve and watched him. "You're not cold?" Noah asked. "I'm used to it. You get a lot of storms like this." "Summer storms? Yeah." Eli was with thunder now, one hand flat on his nose, the horse pushing into it. "He doesn't like thunder." Ironic. "You named him that knowing he was afraid of thunder." "Hector named him, said a horse should have to live up to its name." He moved his hand up the horse's neck. "He's getting better." Noah watched. "How do you know he's getting better?" 3 years ago he'd have been on his back legs. A pause. "Now he just leans." Noah thought about that. He pulled his damp notebook from his jacket pocket. The cover was water-spotted, but the pages were intact. He'd managed to keep it mostly under his jacket and opened to a new page. Then he stopped. "Can I ask you something without writing it down?" Eli turned, looked at him. "You can ask anything." "Do you get lonely here?" The rain hammered the roof. Thunder breathed in slow and steady, soothed. Eli stood still in the stall doorway, looking at Noah with those green eyes. "Sometimes," he said. "Does it bother you?" "Loneliness is," he considered. "It's not always bad. There's a kind of loneliness that's just being with yourself. That kind I don't mind a beat. There's another kind." "What kind is that?" Eli looked at him for a long moment. The rain outside was relentless, battering the old roof, and inside the barn it was warm and golden and smelled of hay and horses and the coming wet earth smell of a summer storm. "The kind where you know what's missing," Eli said. Noah's heart did its thing, the irregular, alarmed, involuntary thing. "Eli, you should put on dry clothes." He stepped out of the stall and closed it behind him. "There are spare things in the house, follow me." He walked to the barn door, unlatched it, and pushed it open into the storm, and the rain rushed in, and Noah stood up from the hay bale and followed him, like he had been following him from the moment he stepped out of that red rental car, which felt now like it had happened in a different lifetime. They waited out the storm in the main house. Eli found him dry clothes, a flannel shirt, too broad in the shoulders, a pair of worn sweatpants with the ranch name on the leg. Noah changed in the bathroom and came back to the kitchen feeling strangely domestic, strangely settled, strangely like a person who had somehow accidentally moved into a house that felt more like home than his actual home. Eli had made tea, not coffee, tea. He had put 2 mugs on the kitchen table without being asked and was sitting in his chair with his hands wrapped around one of them, not reading, no book today, just watching the rain come down the kitchen window. Noah sat down, picked up the mug. "You made tea," he said. "Storm days are tea days," said as simply as Monday is laundry day. Another ranch tradition. Hector's. He looked at the window. He used to say coffee was for starting things and tea was for sitting with them. Noah wrapped both hands around the mug, sat with that. Outside, the rain was beginning to ease, still heavy, but the hammering quality had gone out of it, replaced by something steadier and gentler. The kitchen was warm. The crooked clock on the wall read 2:15. Somewhere in the house, a timber settled with a sound like a sigh. "2 more days," Noah said. Eli didn't respond. "I've been thinking about the article." Noah set the mug down, turned it between his palms. "I know what I want to write. I know the shape of it." "What's the shape?" "It's about persistence," Noah said. Not in the kind of grinding, suffering way, the other kind, the kind that doesn't feel like persistence because you're not thinking about it, you just love something and so you keep going because it would never occur to you to stop. He looked at Eli. That's what this place is. Eli was looking at him, and me. You're the thing the place loves back. A silence, the gentle rain, the warm kitchen, the two mugs. Eli looked down at his tea. Something moved in his face that was more open than anything Noah had seen in 12 days, something that had been behind the stillness all along and was now very slightly not. That's he stopped. Too much, Noah asked. No, quietly, it's true. Noah looked at him. He was aware of his heartbeat, aware of the 12 inches of table between their hands, aware of the rain. Can I tell you something that's not for the article, he said. Eli looked up. You've been doing that the whole time. This is different. A pause, okay. Noah looked at the table, at his hands, at the rain-streaked window, then at Eli because that was where he kept ending up. It was like a compass, it was like gravity. I have never, he said carefully, slowly, in 3 years of this job been somewhere I didn't want to leave. Silence. I've been to beautiful places, Noah continued. I've done this before, come somewhere, spend time, write it up, I'm good at it. I come in, I observe, I write it down, I leave, that's the job, he paused. I've never once, standing at the end of an assignment, felt like I was losing something. Eli was very still. I leave in 2 days, Noah said. I know. And he stopped, started again, I don't know what to do with that. The rain tapped at the window, the clock ticked. Eli picked up his mug, put it down again, ran his thumb along the edge of the table once, that small, precise gesture. Then he looked at Noah with an expression that was not composed for once, that had something raw and open in it. I'm not good at this, he said. I know. I don't, he stopped, with people I don't usually. I know. You keep saying that. Because it's true, I've been watching you for 12 days, I know, Noah leaned forward slightly. I also know you brought me up the North Trail, I know you caught me when I fell, I know you named 3 stars for me on the porch last Tuesday and then pretended it was just navigation information. He paused, I know. Eli looked at him. The whole enormous quiet of the ranch was in that look, everything behind the stillness, everything that had been waiting. I haven't, Eli started, stopped, started again, I haven't known what to do with you since the first morning. What did you want to do with me? A long silence. Not write the article and leave, Eli said. The rain had gone to a soft patter. Outside, the mountains would be washed clean, everything after a storm is washed clean. Noah looked at the man across the table from him, this quiet, honest, extraordinary person who had taught him the names of stars and shown him a sunrise and told him the horse just needed to know he was there. And he felt the whole long, slow burn of 12 days arrive all at once, like a wave that has been building from a long way off. He reached across the table. His hand covered Eli's. Eli looked down at it, then up at Noah. His green eyes were very bright. Neither of them spoke, there was nothing that needed saying, not right then. Outside. The last of the storm moved east toward the mountains, taking its noise with it, and the ranch settled into the particular peace of after. Noah woke early. Earlier than 6, earlier than the light. He lay in the honest little room and looked at the ceiling in the dark and thought about everything and nothing, and then, when the first gray came to the window, he got up and went to the kitchen. The kitchen was empty. He put the kettle on, found the tea, set out 2 mugs. He stood at the kitchen window and watched the dark become gray, become gold, the mountains emerging slowly from the shadow like something being revealed rather than something appearing. He thought about his studio apartment in Brooklyn with the curtain dividing the space. He thought about the city, the noise, the exhaust, the endless purposeful motion of it. He thought about the Meridian Review and Sandra waiting for his draft, and his return flight at 7:15 out of Billings in 2 days. He thought about Eli's hand under his, Eli's face in the storm afternoon kitchen. He heard boots on the hallway floor. Eli appeared in the kitchen doorway. He looked at the 2 mugs, then at Noah. Something almost softened in his face. Storm days are tea days, Noah said, and I thought maybe the day after a storm. I'll take the tea, Eli said. He came to the counter and poured. Noah moved slightly to give him room, and for a moment they were standing side by side at the counter in the dark kitchen, waiting for the tea to steep and the closeness of it, not dramatic, not momentous, just two people standing close in a kitchen making tea, was somehow the most significant thing that had happened yet. "I need to ask you something," Noah said. "You always do. This one isn't for the article." "I know." Noah turned to look at him, Eli turned to look at Noah. "What happens," Noah said, "after I leave?" Eli was quiet for a long moment, his thumb traced the rim of the mug. "What do you want to happen?" "I asked first." "You always do," but he said it gently. "I don't know," he said honestly. He stopped. "I'm not good at things that don't have a clear shape." "I know." "Stop saying that. I can't help it." Eli almost smiled. The almost smile that Noah had been cataloging for 12 days, and that had gotten less almost with every passing day. "I don't want you to just go," Eli said. The words came out carefully, placed with the precision of a person who has chosen them very deliberately. "I know that's not," he exhaled. "I don't know what it looks like, I don't know how it would work. I know you live in Brooklyn and I live here, and those are not small differences," Noah said. "No. I know," Noah looked at him. "I'm not asking you to solve it right now, I'm just asking what you want." A long pause. "I want you to come back," Eli said, simple, true, the way he said everything true. Noah felt it go all the way through him. "Okay," Noah said. Eli looked at him. "Okay. I'll come back." He picked up his mug. "I don't know how or when, but I'll come back." Eli looked at him for a long moment. Then he picked up his own mug, turned toward the window where the light was coming in gold and full now, the mountains sharp against the blue morning sky. "Good," Eli said. They drank their tea in the kitchen, side by side, as the day opened up around them. The last full day was ordinary in all the extraordinary ways that the ranch had taught Noah to see. He helped with the morning feed. He didn't need anyone to tell him what to do anymore, not completely, not with Biscuit, not with the water troughs along the south fence. He moved through the familiar shapes of the morning work with a competence that was modest but real, and he caught Marcus watching him with an expression of low-key approval. "City boy's not bad," Marcus said to Dell. Dell said, which was Dell's version of high praise. At noon, Ryan stopped by again, passing through, he said, just dropping off some paperwork related to the grazing arrangement. He was as easy and friendly as before, and Noah was easy and friendly back, and Eli stood in the yard watching the exchange with his arms crossed and an expression that was, finally, unmistakably readable. Ryan, who was perceptive enough to notice, looked from Noah to Eli and back to Noah, and a small understanding smile crossed his face. He said his goodbyes shortly after, shook Noah's hand with a slightly different energy than before, warmer, less interested, more like one person acknowledging another, and drove his nice truck back down the gravel road. Eli uncrossed his arms. Noah looked at him. "He's a good guy," Noah said. "I told you that. You also looked like you wanted him to leave." Eli said nothing. "Eli." "What?" "It's okay to," Noah took a breath, "you can just." "I know." Now Noah stopped saying it. He looked at Eli, this man who had given him Montana mornings and horse wisdom and the particular language of a person who feels everything deeply and says very little, and he thought, "I am not the same person who got out of that rental car 10 days ago." He was not the same person. He could feel it, the change, solid and irreversible like the land getting under your skin. "Let's go up to the ledge," he said. Eli looked at him. "Now. It's the last afternoon." A pause, then Eli reached for his hat on the hook by the porch. "Come on." They sat on the flat rock in the afternoon light, and the valley was below them and the mountains were ahead, and Noah had his notebook, but he didn't write anything. He just sat. Eli sat beside him, closer than he usually sat, not touching but close, the kind of proximity that is its own language. They watched the shadows move across the valley as the sun began its descent. "I'm going to write the best piece I've ever written," Noah said. "I know," no sarcasm, Eli meant it. "It won't say half of what I want it to say." "It doesn't have to." "No. Write what the place is," Eli said, "that's enough." Noah looked at the valley. The river he couldn't see from here but knew was there, winding through the grass. The rooftops of the ranch buildings, small as toys from up here. His little red rental car, embarrassing, persistent, parked near the gate. "Tell me 3 more stars," Noah said, "for when I get home." A pause, then Eli lifted his hand and pointed at the sky where, in the growing dusk, the first stars were beginning to appear. He named them. He told Noah where to find them from Brooklyn, the adjustments for latitude, the landmarks to use, the time of year when they'd be visible. He talked about the sky the way he talked about everything, precisely, without waste, with deep and quiet love. Noah looked at the stars, then at Eli's profile in the last of the day's light. "I'm going to miss this," Noah said. "The ranch." "The ranch," Noah said, "and you." Eli was quiet. "I know that's," Noah started. "Stop saying you know." "I was going to say I know it's a lot to put out there." "It's not a lot." Eli lowered his hand, turned his head to look at Noah, this close, this direct. "It's honest." "Well," Noah said, "you're rubbing off on me." Eli held his gaze. The stars grew brighter as the sky darkened. The valley below was all deep shadow and distant golden light from the ranch windows. The mountains stood like witnesses. "I'll be here," Eli said, "when you come back." "I know you will," Noah smiled slightly. "That's the thing about you, you're always exactly where you said you'd be." Eli's expression shifted, something opening in it finally and completely, like a door that has been unlocked for a while and is only now swinging wide. He reached over, not suddenly, not impulsively, the way Eli did everything, deliberately, with full knowledge of what he was doing, and put his hand over Noah's where it rested on the rock. Noah turned his hand over, they held on. Below them the ranch lights came on, one by one, warm against the blue dark. Above them the Montana sky filled with stars. The morning of day 14. 5:30, before the alarm, before the light. Noah stood in the honest little room with the crooked lamp and the quilted bed and the window that looked out over the paddock, and he zipped his duffel bag and put it by the door. He stood at the window for a long time. The paddock was dark. He could see the shapes of the horses, Biscuit nearest to the fence, Thunder at the back, slow movements in the early dark. The mountains were invisible behind the night sky, but he knew where they were. He knew the shape of the sky now in a way he hadn't 10 days ago. He picked up his notebook, opened to the last page of the section that was his, the real section, and read what he'd written the night before. "What I know about Eli Casto. He feeds the horses before himself every morning. He reads the same book over and over because he loves it and doesn't need it to be new. He thinks honesty is the only default. He gives trust slowly and completely. He named me 3 stars and then 12 more, and will tell you that's just navigation, but it isn't. He has never asked me to be less than I am. He is the only person I have ever met who I don't have to explain myself to. I think I've been waiting my whole life to not have to explain myself." He closed the notebook, picked up the duffel bag. Eli was on the porch. Of course he was. 6 in the morning, and there he was, sitting in his chair, hat on, coffee in hand. Coffee today, not tea, because this was a starting things morning, not a sitting with them morning, watching the dawn come in over the mountains. Noah put his duffel down on the porch steps and sat in the second chair. They didn't speak for a while. The light came slowly, the way it always did, the way Noah would now always think of when he thought of mornings. "Marcus cried a little," Noah said, "when I said goodbye last night. He cries at commercials." Dell said. Noah smiled. He said, "Drive safe." "That's Dell saying he'll miss you." "I know." Eli looked at him. "Sorry," Noah said, "old habit. Don't apologize for it. You hate when I say." "I don't hate it." Eli looked back at the mountains. "It just means you're paying attention. I don't mind people who pay attention." Noah looked at him. The hat brim, the jaw, the hands loose around the coffee mug, all of it familiar now. All of it part of the map of his internal world, which had changed shape around this place and this person over the past 2 weeks in ways he was still understanding. "I'll call when I'm back," Noah said, "if that's. I want you to." "Okay. And the article when it's done. You'll be the first person to read it." Eli nodded. The sun broke over the mountains. The gold light hit the valley, hit the porch, hit both of them. Eli reached over and gripped Noah's shoulder, brief, firm, exactly the right amount of time. Not a hug and not just a touch. The thing between those two things, which was its own language, which Noah understood completely. "Come back," Eli said. "I will," Noah said. He stood, picked up the duffel bag, walked down the porch steps, opened the gate, walked to the embarrassing red rental car and put his bag in the back seat. He turned around. Eli was still on the porch, still in the chair, hat on, coffee in hand, watching him with those green eyes. Noah raised his hand. Eli raised his. Noah got in the car. He drove down the gravel road, the pale dust rising behind him. He watched the ranch in the rearview mirror, the red barns, the wooden gate, the wide wraparound porch, until the road curved and the trees blocked the view and there was only the mountains ahead and the open sky and a road leading forward. He pulled over 100 yards past the curve, sat in the car with his hands on the wheel. He opened his notebook to a fresh page. And he wrote the first line of the best piece he would ever write. On the Blackridge Ranch in the valley below the mountains, there is a man who knows the name of every horse and every star, who cooks breakfast before dawn and reads the same book until it falls apart, who talks less than anyone I have ever met and says more than almost anyone I know. His name is Eli Casto, and he will tell you the ranch is just land and work and sky. He is wrong. It is also him. And I know, because I have been paying attention, that the land feels the same way about him. The Brooklyn apartment was exactly as he'd left it. Which is to say, small and cluttered and full of the noise of the city coming through the window at all hours and smelling of the particular smell of a studio apartment that has been closed up for 2 weeks in summer, which is not entirely unlike the smell of a mistake. Noah stood in the doorway for a moment, looked at the curtain dividing the space. The kitchen that was also his living room, the coffee shop cups on the counter that he hadn't thrown away before he'd left because he'd packed in a rush. He put his bag down. He went to the window and opened it. The city noise came in immediately: traffic, voices, a car alarm 3 blocks over, the specific music of 10,000 lives happening simultaneously. He used to love this sound. It used to feel like proof that things were happening. He stood at the window and listened, and what he felt was not hate and not love but distance, like a radio station playing from too far away, too much static between you and the signal. His phone buzzed. Sandra, welcome back, draft in 3 weeks. He texted back, too. She sent back a thumbs up and a coffee cup emoji. He put the phone down, stood at the window, looked at the piece of Brooklyn sky between the buildings, smaller than it had any right to be, considering the sky was infinite, but that's what buildings do. He found the 3 stars Eli had named. The first night home, late past midnight, he stood at his window and found all 3 of them in the small rectangle of sky between the buildings, faint against the city light but there, undeniable. He texted Eli, found them. It took 3 minutes, then good. Noah smiled at his phone in the dark kitchen. Then ranch is good, Thunder ate Marcus's hat. Then after a pause, miss the quiet. Noah typed back, miss more than the quiet. The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Come back soon. The weeks went by the way weeks do when you're in them, and the ending isn't yet visible. Noah wrote, he wrote well, better than he'd written in years. Sandra called him after the first draft and used words like alive and human, and this is the piece you've been building to, in a voice that meant she was genuinely moved. He revised it twice. He cut 3 paragraphs he loved because they were the ones where the professional voice went slightly off and the personal voice came in too clearly, and even in the section that was for everyone, that felt like it belonged only to him. He and Eli talked on the phone twice a week. It started as Tuesday and Friday, practically professionally, then became Tuesday and Friday and sometimes also Wednesday when Eli had something to say about the North Trail light or a horse situation or a book he'd thought Noah should know about, and then once, at 11:30 on a Sunday night just because. That last one, Noah didn't quite know how it started. He'd been sitting on his bed with the curtain open and the city sounds coming in and the 3 stars visible in the window, and he'd called without thinking about it, and Eli had answered on the 3rd ring with a simple yeah that sounded like he'd been expecting it. They talked for 2 hours about nothing and everything, about Lonesome Dove, which Noah had finally bought and started, about the drought that was threatening the eastern pasture, about a piece Noah had read about cities built on riverbeds, about what it would look like to bring the city version of something and leave it somewhere rural, whether cities leave residue in people. Do you think I left residue? Noah asked. A pause. What kind are you asking about? Either kind. Yes. Is that? Yes, Eli said again, and his voice was different in the dark over the phone, warmer, like the layer of reserve fell off slightly without the effort of being seen. It's fine, good, you left good residue. That is the most romantic thing you've ever said to me. A silence, then very dry, don't get used to it. Noah lay back on his bed and laughed at the ceiling, and the stars were in the window and somewhere on a ranch under a much bigger version of the same sky. A man was maybe, possibly, almost smiling. He went back 6 weeks later. He could have gone sooner. He'd thought about going sooner. He'd looked at flights 3 separate times in 4 weeks. But he had the article to finish, properly finish, because it deserved to be finished well, and he had the question of what going back meant to sit with, which was not a small question, and he gave it the weight it deserved. What it meant was this: it meant that he was going somewhere where something true had started, and he was going back to find out what it was when you gave it room to continue. That was enough. He called Eli the night before. "I'm coming tomorrow." A pause that was not empty. "What time?" Eli said. "My flight lands at 4, I'll have a car by 5. I'll leave the gate unlocked." "I know you will. You're doing it again." "Old habit." He heard Eli breathe, steady and slow over the phone. "I'll have dinner ready." "I'd like that," Noah said. In a pause, "I finished the book." Noah was quiet for a moment. He knew which book. He'd known since the second week. Some part of him had known. "I'll be there by 5, he said. "Okay," Eli said. "Eli." "What?" "Thank you for," he stopped, "for everything, the trail and the stars and the horse and all of it." A silence that held more than silence usually does. "Just come back," Eli said quietly. "I'm coming," Noah said. The road to Blackridge Ranch was the same gravel road, the same dust, the same mountains in the distance, the same enormous sky, the same wooden gate. Blackridge, ESD 1941, private property. But the gate was open, and Eli was standing beside it. Not waiting on the porch, not inside, beside the gate, standing in the early evening light with his hat on and his hands loose at his sides and his green eyes on the little red rental car, because Noah had requested the same car, had specifically asked the rental agency for a red compact, which the woman on the phone had found puzzling but accommodated as it came down the gravel road. Noah stopped the car, got out, left the bag in the back seat. He stood on the gravel and looked at Eli. Eli looked at him. "You're early," Eli said. "Traffic was light. You're in Montana." "Old habit." Eli held his gaze for a long moment. The evening light was doing the thing it always did here, turning everything to something almost too beautiful to look at directly. It caught the mountain faces and the pale grass and Eli's jaw and the curve of the wooden gate, and Noah stood in the middle of all of it and thought, "Here, this is the place." Eli reached into his jacket, pulled out a book worn and crack-spined, heavy with 100 readings. "Lonesome Dove." He held it out. Noah took it, looked at Eli. "You really finished it," Noah said. "I told you. In 6 weeks. I had things on my mind." A beat helps to have something to read. Noah looked down at the book in his hands, all that weight and history and Hector's memory in the cracked spine, then up at Eli. "Thank you," he said. "Don't thank me yet, read it first." He turned and started walking toward the house, then stopped and looked back. "There's something in the cover." Noah opened it. There, inside the front cover, in handwriting that was spare and precise and unmistakably Eli's. "North Fence Trail, 6 m, don't be 3.5 minutes late." Noah closed the book. He looked up at the man standing in the evening gold of his own land, with the mountain sky behind him and the horses moving in the paddock and the warm-lit windows of the main house, and he thought, "This is the person I don't have to explain myself to." "I'll be ready at 6, Noah said. Eli almost smiled. And then he fully smiled, actually, genuinely, finally, for the first time in all the days Noah had been watching and waiting for it. It changed his face entirely. It was quiet and warm and completely real, the smile of someone who doesn't do it lightly, and so when they do it, it means everything. "Come on," Eli said, "dinner's ready." Noah picked up his bag from the back seat of the red car, closed the door, and walked through the open gate. Behind him, the mountains caught the last of the evening light. Ahead, the porch lights were on, warm and steady in the coming dark. He walked into the light. Epilogue: the article. From the Meridian Review, issue 84. The Last Quiet Ranch. By Noah Vega. On the Blackridge Ranch in the valley below the mountains, there is a man who knows the name of every horse and every star. His name is Eli Casto. He is 24 years old. He wakes before sunrise and works until the light is gone and reads the same book until the cover gives out and then he reads it again. He talks less than almost anyone I have ever met. He says more. I went to Blackridge to write about the disappearance of traditional ranching in America, the economics, the land pressure, the encroachment of industrial methods, the steady erasure of something that took 100 years to build. I have written that piece. It is accurate and well-sourced, and it contains everything you need to know about why places like Blackridge matter. But this is the other piece, the one underneath. This is the piece about what it looks like when a place is loved, not managed, not maintained, not held as investment, but genuinely, absolutely, daily loved. When the land and the life and the work are not separate things but one continuous thing, and the person doing the work is the same person who would do it for nothing, would do it if no one was watching, would do it in the rain and the drought and the long Montana winter and the relentless Montana summer because it would never once occur to them to stop. His grandfather told him once that a man needs three things: work that matters, land he can stand on, and at least one person he doesn't have to explain himself to. I think about this often. I think there are people in the world who spend their whole lives looking for one of those three things and never quite finding it. And I think there are people, rare, steady, extraordinary people, who plant themselves in the right soil and grow into all three at once, quietly, without making a fuss, the way a tree grows. The Blackridge Ranch will still be here in 50 years. I am certain of this in the way you are certain of things you know not from evidence but from the quality of your attention. The land will be here, the horses will be here, the stars will be where they've always been. And Eli Casto will be standing on the porch in the early morning, watching the mountains, speaking only when he has something worth saying. Which is more often than you'd think. Noah Vega wrote this piece over 2 visits to the Blackridge Ranch, Montana. He is currently based in Brooklyn but spends as much time as possible elsewhere. The end for now. And so they stood, side by side on that porch in the early morning, beneath a Montana sky so wide and so honest that there was nothing left to hide. Eli, the man of few words and deep roots, and Noah, the man who came to write about a place and found something he hadn't known he was looking for. The ranch breathed around them. The horses moved in the paddock. The mountains waited, steady as always, for whatever came next. Because that's the thing about quiet places and quieter people, they don't rush the ending. They just make room for whatever is true.
If this story moved you, like this video so more people can find these stories. Subscribe so you never miss a new story. Comment below with one word that describe how this story made you feel. I read every single one. Thanks for watching and keep watching for more interesting stories on this channel.